I'm Michael Avis. I came into Oracle with the Sun acquisition, so that was in 2010. My background at Sun was very much on the product side, so I was a product marketeer, product sales director. So I was very used to having something that I believed people wanted to buy, and I was desperate to tell them all about what I had to sell to them or to market to them. So it's a big transition for me to become an account-based marketeer. And I know how difficult that transition can be if you've got a way of thinking that you need to fundamentally change. So this is what it was like coming into Oracle. Those of there's always somebody in the room that's either working at Oracle now or has worked at Oracle. You come in via an acquisition. It's a fairly scary thing, and I came in and was, this is like being in a startup, really. This is meant to show you what it's like being in a startup. You're in a crappy little office with painted walls, and that's what it was like for us. There was only 3 of us that were remotely interested in this. We kind of took over from what had been an industry marketing team. So that was a good first step in that it wasn't a product marketing team. This was already trying to move away from being desperate to tell people what we had to sell from a technology perspective. At least this was a team that was trying to talk to people about their industry. So we were fortunate in that this was a good launch pad really for account-based marketing. Industry marketing, if any of you are doing that, that's a pretty decent place to start. So what we tried to think about right from the beginning was to dramatically change our thinking to what customers want rather than what we had to sell. And this is quite it's easy to say, but it's incredibly difficult to do, especially when you're part of a company like Oracle, which, for all its faults, it does produce a massively impressive portfolio of technology. There's 120,000 people in Oracle globally, and the vast majority of people are aligned to a technology silo of one sort or another. So you have people that are focused on applications, whether it's for human resources, CRM, HR systems, and then you have people focused on technology, whether that's databases, of course, systems, storage, middleware. And to take that and then try and convert that into something that customers want to hear about is a pretty difficult thing to do. But that's what we tried to do. So we tried to close that gap between all of these fantastic products that we had and actually what customers were doing and what they were thinking about. And if you think, now that we're this far down the line, we all now know that if you're a bank, you're more than a retail bank in particular, you're more than likely thinking, how can I provide a service to my customers, existing older generation customers, newer, younger generation customers, in a way that they all get a very good service, but I have to dramatically reduce my costs in providing that service. That's what a good chunk of the retail bank industry is thinking about, providing that service, dramatically reducing the cost. So they're going to be thinking about digital banking. They're not going to be thinking about what, the technology jigsaw that companies like Oracle has, which technology. They're going to be thinking about their bank, the services they provide. A retailer is probably going to be thinking, how can I provide a omni-channel experience for my customers, whether they come into my store, they go to my website, they use my app, they take deliveries from my drivers. How can I give them an experience that reflects the values of my brand? Most of the senior people in the retailers are going to be thinking about things like that. They're not going to be thinking, what's the hottest autonomous database right out there at the moment, or what's the best CX, customer experience system at the moment. And we had to try and close that gap between what we believe customers want and what we wanted to sell them. So, we start over here with this, what we want to sell and what we think they want to buy. Customers are over here, what they actually want to buy and what we think what they think we do. So there's a significant gap to close there, and it turns out that account-based marketing is the best way of doing that. No question in our minds that if you can do this and you can do it reasonably well, you've got the best possible chance of closing that gap. The way we do it at this high level is, the first thing is try and understand the customer's aspirations. So whether it is that bank or it is that communications company or that retailer, is what are their aspirations? Where do they currently sit in their industry? How are they doing against their competitors? What do you understand about where they want to go? And then even more important is, who is it within the customer that you need to talk to in a way that they'll welcome you talking to them about those aspirations? On the other side of this is, how do you communicate the value that you can bring to them? And how do you communicate it in a way that's going to resonate with the customer? You really have to think about that. It's more than just looking at their annual report and trying to adopt the same tone of voice. You've really got to get underneath that and communicate in a way using their language without patronizing them. One of the biggest mistakes we made, and we sometimes still do, is we roll up at a customer and we start telling them about their business and their industry as if they didn't know. So you have to check what you're doing for, tell us something we don't already know, Oracle. And we always, try and make sure we don't patronize customers and bore them to tears with something they already know. But what you're really after, if you can pull these things together, is the piece in the middle that, again, ABM, we think, is unique in being able to do this, is that you can collaborate with customers. You can co-create with customers a vision of their success. I don't know of any other form of marketing that gives you a shot at doing that, because you're always making too many assumptions. If you can get people within the customer to work with you on some of these materials that you're creating and help them create and imagine a vision of their own success, you're then really in business. They then start to trust you, they start to relate and empathize with you just as you're trying to do with them. And in our experience, again, account-based marketing gives you the best chance at doing that. So trying to stick with this journey rather than, preaching to you about what you should be doing. So when our journey started 6-7 years ago, we just started doing stuff. So that stuff at the time was pretty basic. So we started doing account newsletters where we did it by industry. So we started to say, okay, how many, we've got 10 of our key accounts are telcos. So let's look at the telco industry. Remember, we had this industry kind of starting point. And let's put a newsletter together for all of our telco key accounts against what we think we see that's going on in their industry, and let's shove an Oracle product in there to solve that issue or to capitalize on that opportunity. So we started sending out these newsletters, barely personalized. This was the old stick the customer's logo on a piece of generic marketing and call that account-based marketing. So we were there, we were doing that kind of stuff. We also focused on trying to get customers to agree to doing an Oracle day. So that was a fairly, basic error, calling it an Oracle day, as if a customer is going to give us a day of their time to come and hear all about Oracle. But that's the kind of thing we started to do. It was normal marketing, newsletters, events, but we did them in a way that we were trying to make the customer think they were special for them. So on our journey, we've done a lot of stuff, starting off with pretty basic stuff. I think now we're doing much better, more sophisticated stuff on the journey to where we want to be. So in these 6 years, we've touched 105 accounts in total. We currently have, so my universe, my market is 93 accounts in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. That number has fluctuated over the past 6 or 7 years. We've gone as high as having 120 accounts. It's gone as low as 70. It's crept back up to 93. It was when I looked yesterday. So that's my universe. Most of there's 20 of, just give you an idea of how this works for us. 20 of those key accounts are in the UK. Then there's a dozen or so France, Germany, similarly in Italy. Slightly fewer in Spain. 6 in the Nordic countries, and then a dozen or so in EMEA, which for us is Eastern Europe, Middle East and Africa. I should say about how we're structured as a team as well. So whilst there were 3 of us back in 2011, 2012, there are now, I have a team of 8. So there's me plus 8. So our ratio is very close to this 10-to-1 that people have talked about. I think that is the absolute maximum when you're doing. So I'm only talking about strategic ABM at the moment. The key account ABM, by the way. That 10-to-1 is absolute maximum. If you have account-based marketeers running around trying to do strategic account-based marketing with more than 10 accounts each, they're going to really struggle with that. They're not going to be able to give each account enough time. They're not going to be able to develop relationships with the account teams properly. You're not giving them a chance to really make an impact and be successful. So whilst on paper, I've got a team of people. There's somebody in France. There are 12 accounts. So straight away we've broken the 10-to-1. In practice, it's still well within the 10-to-1 because we don't engage with all of these accounts all of the time. And in amongst all of this, I wouldn't go. We were then, but now, we don't go crazy on the more activity, the better. We've talked about volume versus value was a comment made earlier, and that goes all the way through for us in terms of the activities and the number of accounts that we're engaging with. Is we only engage on accounts within these 93 where there is a clear, for us in Oracle, there is a clear cloud transformation opportunity, which there nearly always is, but there is a clear one. We know what it is, we understand it, and then we will engage. So that's, we use grids, of X and Y axis. Up the vertical axis is the the strength of that opportunity, or the propensity to buy in a cloud transformation context. So if we can see that cloud transformation opportunity and the engagement with the account team is strong, then we will engage. If either of those 2 things is not true, we don't engage, or we try not to engage. Marketeers tend to want to engage, so one of the things I do as the manager of this team is to look at that carefully and not feel that any of my valuable team are being dragged into accounts where there's neither the cloud transformation opportunity or the proper relationship with the account team that gives them the best shot to be successful. So that's how we manage this less than 10-to-1, is we don't engage everywhere, only engage where you can be successful. But we've done a lot of stuff, as you can see. We've got a repository of assets now, which we need to do some housekeeping on because there's too much of the old stuff that we would never use again. But there is a decent repository now of account-based marketing assets we've used, from basic brochures, microsites, videos, all of the kinds of assets which I'll talk about in a moment that we've used in the accounts. You can then start to think about reusing once you've built that repository. So I wouldn't say we had these guiding principles in the first year of doing account-based marketing, but we developed them as we started to get a little bit more of a sense of where we wanted to go. So it's not going to blow anybody away with how clever this is. But these happen to be our guiding principles that we settled on 5 years ago, and they still are, and they've stood the test of time as we've gone through this journey. Is that number one is understand the customer and align to their agenda. If you're doing ABM and not really doing that properly, I would argue it's not really account. You're not giving yourself a chance with being successful in account-based marketing. What you're doing is account-based activity, which is different than true account-based marketing. And if you want to do account-based activity, because the way you're trying to get awareness, you're trying to measure yourself on how many people you can touch in your customers, that's, I'm not going to argue with it. But make sure you're differentiating between account-based activity and account-based marketing. So for us in account-based marketing is understand the customer's agenda, create a transformational conversation, and reset perceptions. So, I'm standing here as a representative of Oracle. Everybody has a perception of a company like Oracle, who are, in any way connected to IT, whether you're in a customer or you're in a supplier or an agency position. Most people's perceptions of Oracle is not what I wish they were. In a perfect world, I wish my universe of key accounts were all looking at Oracle as an ideal partner as they transform to modern digital cloud technology that will help them with their business and, or if they're a government, their objectives for their citizens. I wish that were true. But most, or a good chunk of our customers, we all have this perception versus reality gap in our business. A good chunk of our customers would see Oracle as a database company. They may see us there, we can stick a database in the cloud, that kind of stuff. But they see us as, technology company at least. They probably see us as a difficult company, a company that's pretty tough to negotiate with, a company that shows up when there's a big deal to be done, does the deal, then goes away again, lets you get on with it. There's all these perception issues that as account-based marketers, for us, it's a great opportunity because our business is to try and change those. Some of the first meetings we have with our account teams is we talk to them about their account, and one of the biggest issues they'll tell us is, my customer's perception of us is terrible. And as marketeers, I think we're in a much better position to change that perception than they are, because they can't stop selling. They can't stop. Customers can see through that fairly easily. And as marketeers, we've got an opportunity to help change that perception by taking a different approach to sales. This idea of trust is really important to us. And the only way I think, one of the ways we try and build trust is we're always looking at what's in it for the customer to possibly react to some of our marketing. So, for example, in a very basic way, when we're trying to talk to our accounts in perhaps they're trying to digitally disrupt a part of their business. They may be looking for a new business model. They may be, they may just seen something cool that, a brand like Nike or Apple or someone's doing, and they might want to disrupt part of their business to get onto something like that. The sorts of things we can come along and do is we can have a conversation about these things, and we've got people in Oracle that really understand, and they're fantastic experts. Free expertise we can offer them. But we can offer them something a little bit more structured, like a digital disruption experience workshop for free. Something that a CMO or a chief sales officer or a service officer may have to go out to a consultancy and pay for to get their team through how do we digitally disrupt this, go through a structure, 2 days experience on coming out with an answer. That can be one of our calls to action. We can offer that. And if you do that kind of thing in an account, you can build trust, and they start to see you in a different way. But there's got to be something in it for us as well. And it's interesting again that everybody's onto this idea that how do you measure account-based marketing, and I'll come to that at the end. But it isn't about leads. It isn't about pipeline. These measures. We've been saddled with these measures within Oracle for most of our account-based marketing journey. The good news for us right now is, the CMO who's running marketing for us now in EMEA and APAC, she's an enlightened marketeer. She's come in from the outside. She's not come up through the Oracle way of thinking about these things. And I get the distinct impression she's not going to continue to saddle us with those kinds of metrics, and one of the and in its place, I'm interested in metrics like how many advocates can we create for the Oracle brand from what we do, and that's I'll come to that in terms of extending the parts of the customer journey that we are engaged with. I think as marketeers, we're all very familiar with trying to engage with customers during their buying cycle. Account-based marketing should also be engaging customers during their purchase, implementation, value realization, and ultimately the recommendation cycle as well. And that's part of what we're trying to do now, is to extend account-based marketing into the customer cycle as well as just in the buying cycle before they've actually bought this thing from you. So those principles became our model. And this is, again, something that's stood the test of time. So we have this insight to advisor model whereby we have an insight phase, which is what you'd expect. We're looking to understand our customers. We're looking to understand the people that we need to know within those customers. And we use technology to do that. So with some of the agencies and other partners that are here today, when we started this, there was a couple of agencies out there that said they were ABM. There was some agencies that said they were ABM and they clearly weren't. And you have to sort that out if you're on my side of the fence. Work out who really does know this stuff and who doesn't. But on the insight phase, social listening is a great insight, whereby if you've got customers that are out there talking about their business, talking about their industry, they happen to be influential, social listening is a great source of insight, and we have an insights platform for doing that. We've worked with Agent 3, we've worked with Momentum on that kind of insight. Other forms of insight would be intent data. So if you can get some exposure to the research phase that was mentioned earlier, before a customer will ever talk to you, when they're researching, if you can get insight to what they're researching, then that's great insight. That can end up being intent data, propensity to buy for the kinds of things that you want to be able to sell. So insight, we don't do anything in a customer without insight. And I mustn't forget, probably the biggest source of insight, if you're working at the strategic end, is the account team itself. And again, if they don't have insight on their customer, and you sometimes go to account team meetings in Oracle and there's 30 people sitting in the room, if there's not sufficient insight on that customer sitting in that room, you've got a problem. And the job of ABM is the challenge for ABM is that it's not that there's not the insight sitting in the room, it's getting it out of people's heads and into a story that you can play sensibly back to the customer. Because if you leave it to the customer, to the salespeople in the room to tell that story, inevitably they're going to have their own narrow agenda. They've got their own product to sell. They've got their own contacts to talk to. They've got their own perception of how to represent the Oracle brand properly. And you can't take a risk on that. So part of ABM is to get these sources of insight, whether it's through social listening, whether it's through intent data, or whether it's through the account team, and craft that into a transformational conversation, which is the perspective. So we used to call that proposition, value proposition. The trouble with when we called it that was it gave people the impression this was really all about Oracle. This was our proposition. We refined that to perspective because perspective is a softer story. It's our perspective. It's our thoughts on the industry you're in, on you, your challenges. We can make a perspective more all about them and less about us. So for us, a perspective is, there's no fixed format of what a perspective is. It tends, in our case, to be a 12-page document, which will be the foundation for everything else we do. Because there's a real temptation in account-based marketing when you're working with sales to jump straight round to the engage. I want to do an event. I want a video. Because my mate has got this video you did for him, I want the same. Because, let's face it, I don't buy into all this, marketing can't get on with sales, because I was in sales. I look at the key account director job at Oracle, incredibly difficult job. They are charged with being the face of Oracle to these enormous customers who are powerful brands in their industry. They've got powerful personalities working in there. And you've got the account director at Oracle who's trying to establish a business relationship at a peer level with some very heavyweight people. and they're trying to orchestrate disparate resources in Oracle, none of whom report to them. They're all reporting into these silos I mentioned, or a lot of them are. Incredibly difficult, challenging job being a key account director in any company, and I know it is Oracle. So I have enormous respect and empathy for these people, but I don't take any, I don't take any rubbish from them. Because I'm the marketing expert. I don't tell them how to establish relationships, negotiate complex contracts, run a sales team. I might have a few things to say about that, but I don't want them telling me how to craft a perception, decide on the right communication assets, and how to engage with the customer through a story. So, you know, it's stick to this model, or we stick to this model, and we don't go far wrong. So the perspective is the foundation. The communication assets, so this is where the shiny things start to appear, like the videos, like the microsites, you know, whatever you choose to use within your customer. The trick of ABM is to decide which are the right ones. So if you've got your insight right, and you've profiled people properly that you want to engage with, you should have a good understanding of which communication assets are they likely to consume. So they may be a company that loves 1-minute videos. They may be a company that prefers a microsite. You've got to at least have a clue about which assets to use rather than just build an expensive video. Anyone who builds 2-minute videos knows they cost, well, our agencies charge us way too much, obviously, but they're not cheap things to do. You don't want to take a chance on building, I don't know, a $7,000 video and it not resonate with the customer, because that's not how they like to consume their, that's not how they want to establish a conversation. And then engagement is the final stage. So this is where we all want to get to. Yeah? You want to meet people. You want to have, in our case, I want to have the incredibly bright, interesting, visionary people that we have in Oracle who are dotted around. You know, Oracle people, for whatever anybody thinks, you know, you get inside Oracle and there are some incredibly engaging, clever people. And as a marketer, I want to connect those people with their opposite numbers in customers. And I see myself as one of these people, you know, and my team, more importantly, is, you know, my team are all senior marketeers. They're all, in Oracle's language, all director level. I want them talking to the senior marketeers in our key accounts. So that's, again, an easy thing to say, but when you're in a company like Oracle with our engineering sales heritage, the sales teams are not very comfortable with marketers having direct contact with their customers. So we have to break that little barrier down, because if they let us in, the conversation that many of you and I could have with a CMO or their team within any of these accounts is a much more interesting and engaging one than any salesperson could have, because we can relate to their challenges because we have the same job as they do. And so that engagement is what we're after. You know, we're after experts within our company talking to experts within our customers, getting some trust going, and that will change perception. So we've, over this journey, built this toolkit where in each of these phases of our journey, we have things that we use over. They're not the same things, but we have, you know, this is what we do in each one of these spaces. I don't want this to be a constraint to anybody in my team. They can do whatever they want within reason. But these are the tried and trusted things that we do in each of these phases. The other little thing that's popped up in the middle of this circle is Gen C. Gen C for us is that's the brand of our advocacy program. So this is where, you know, I would love to be like some of our competitors, who I won't mention because I don't want to give them any airtime, but somebody who's not like Apple. I think a lot of people who are Apple enthusiasts are quite happy to advocate that brand to other people. So I'm happy to do that. You know, I unconsciously an Apple advocate. I think those of us who are impressed by the customer service you get from a brand like Amazon, you know, we all will speak well of them. That's what we try and do, I dream of having at least one brand advocate in our key accounts. And that's a pretty tough thing to pull off. But we're getting there. We've got, we've got a few people who are willing to advocate our brand. They're not customer reference sites, and that's fairly, that's another form of advocacy. But these are people that are willing to just be proud to be associated with us. They're willing to give us credit for their success or some of their success. So that's how we, as part of our evolution. And these are some imagery of the kinds of things we've done. And you can see there's not a lot of Oracle branding on this. So again, your account-based marketing assets, if you see your own company all over them, then you probably need to tweak that a bit. You need to make it about the customer. There are some challenges there. You need to get permission often from customers to use their brand, their palettes and so on within the assets that you're producing, but it's well worth it if you can get that. And that's if you look at our repository, you don't see as much as Oracle as you might imagine. Internal communications, again, if you're in this little startup and you're doing ABM, nobody else really understands it or gets it. You have to internally communicate. So we've tried our best here. It's not perfect. We're trying to teach people what ABM is internally. We try, this article here is how important having a perspective is. We've got all of our activities. One of the things you get asked about all the time in ABM is, what are you doing? What is it that you do? So, we've got a place they can go and have a look at what we do. And then I mentioned this journey. So our toolkit, which is represented by those little icons traveling up this graph, is a suggestion of where you would deploy them depending where the customer is on their journey. And so I know this is a difficult thing, the text is quite small, but if you look at the very top of it, that's the customer journey that we think they go on, where they have a need, they do some research, they do some evaluation. They're not talking to their suppliers at that point. And when they're in that phase, our objective is to be relevant to them. So we would be doing insight to understand how to be relevant. And then we would move to building a perspective. And then as they go through the purchase, we would want to be communicating and engaging with them by then. After the purchase, we want to stay there. We want to stay with them. We want to help them create a vision of their success. We want to help them internally communicate this thing they've bought. And by doing that, we want them to be proud to be associated with us. So for us, that's our current point of evolution, is to extend ABM to the width of this journey rather than really focus, because you can get too myopic on the deal. You get called in by a sales team to do some account marketing when there's a deal. If you're doing account-based marketing or the whole journey, you're going to be more, you're going to give yourself a better chance of establishing that trust and collaboration with the customer. So this is a day in the life of an Oracle ABMer, if you like. They're looking at prioritizing their accounts. They each have too many. There's more than 10 to 1 each. So they have to prioritize their accounts. They're looking at data. They're talking to the sales team. And they're deciding which are their big bets. So that's a classic conversation they're going to be having with me. Which of your 12 accounts are your big bets? I'm only looking for 4 this half in any of our planning cycles, for example. And then I'm asking them, so what's your strategy? I don't want to know what your activities are. I want to know what your strategy is for this customer. What are your goals? Is it perception change? So what's your strategy for changing perception? Who are you trying to reach? What are you trying to say to them? And then we'll talk about execution and tactics. So then they say, then we're talking budgets and operational stuff. But an ABMer's job is a more complete business-oriented job, and you have to pick the right people to do this. So where we are now is one of the things I'd advise you to do is, even if you think you know ABM inside out, is don't assume all the best ideas are in your own company. There's vendors here that have great ideas and insights into what makes for great ABM. We're currently happen to be talking to Serious Decisions as we look to benchmark ourselves with an industry standard framework for ABM. The reason we're doing that is, number one is we're trying to not assume we have all the best ideas, but the second reason is this idea of scaling it. So I think I know a fair amount about key account or strategic ABM. What about named account ABM, which is the 1,000 accounts scenario, for example, or the industry segment ABM? What are the models? What are the different, there's the same core principles, but operationally, how are they different? And again, from what Joel was saying earlier, you're probably going to introduce more technology the further down that customer pyramid that you travel, because in order to scale, you can't just keep throwing people at it at a 10-to-1 ratio if you're dealing with thousands of accounts, obviously. So data is important as you try and scale. So one of the things that I would love to happen is this is somehow automated. We talked about automation earlier, but I don't see automation is quite clever enough yet, in that it will spot intent and in propensity to buy and automatically squirt relevant content to the right people in the account that engages them in a transformational conversation. I don't see that automation yet, but you'd want to start thinking about how you can get that to start happening if you're trying to do things at scale. And technology is the only way to do that. You can't keep throwing expensive people at that. Content syndication is now, important to us. So whilst we used to build all of our content for all of our accounts completely uniquely from scratch, in this mission to become very account specific, you find that that's quite expensive and inefficient. So now we're into a big, how do we reuse some of these fantastic assets we've built in one account, reuse them in another account? You typically look at that from an industry perspective. So you've done these things in these retail banks, why aren't you talking about similar things in this other retail bank? Just basic things like that. Content syndication will help you scale. We're using our own technology, obviously. We've got Eloqua in the portfolio, so we can track people on a journey through their touch points with us. We've got digital body language data. We can see how they're engaging with us across all of Oracle, whether it's events or web estates and so on. This is part of our journey, if we can use some of our own technology now that didn't used to exist. And then finally, measurement. So again, we don't want to assume we know the best way to do this. And we like this model from Serious Decisions, where you look at, how to measure the impact of account-based marketing in these 4 categories. So readiness, very basic. Have you got the profiles? Have you got the insight? Have you got those customer lifecycle mapped against what you're doing? Yes or no? You can see a balanced scorecard coming out from that, red, green, or amber, against all of your accounts. Activities. So, activity, how many people are you touching? How many of the C-level people do you know? How many visits have you had to the account microsites that you've built? So, you can measure activities. Don't get obsessed with that. That's been one of the things we did. We're very happy to tell people about activities. Needs to be there, but one of 4. It's not the only thing. Incredibly importantly is what are the outcomes that you're getting from those activities. So C-level participation is an outcome. Inquiries, proposals, and then finally the business impact is the final that's the benchmark. How many of these cloud transformations in our case, so one of the measures I have is the SaaS penetration that Oracle has within its key accounts. That's a measure for me as we go forward. So that's our journey. We've got a long way to go. We don't assume that we're the world's experts at this. We've got to scale out. We've got to measure properly. We've got to integrate better with teams within Oracle that are doing different things to us. But we're really glad we did this. It's really helped a group of marketeers within Oracle close that gap between what we want to sell and what customers want to buy. So thanks very much.
Please stay there.